Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for this brief webinar this afternoon, this evening. Nice to have you here. The way it's going to work today is that Gayan and I will speak a little bit about spiritual practice. And then at the end, we will give you some information if you're interested in joining the online community of spiritual practice. So at the end, there's also going to be a special offer for those who are just joining. So if you're interested in that, you can stay on to the end and hear that. Okay, so let's get started.
Okay, do you want to start with a little attunement or silence?
Yeah, basically, Gayan and I are going to just talk back and forth. By the way, I'm Taj, for those of you who haven't met me and I don't know. This is Gayan. So let's start with just taking a moment of becoming present right now. Some of us just took our seat after a busy day, or we're messing around with tech stuff, or frustrated about this or that, and others are just quite open and present. Our topic, as you know, is spiritual practice. Murshid Hazrat Khan defines spirit as having to do with spirit. So something that is of a fine nature. So during the day, our daily life, we can get covered with impressions and agitation or a lot of mental activity. So if we just take a moment to drop all that, one way is to just become aware of breathing. Like right now, be aware of inhaling, exhaling, and then there's a pause, a kind of empty space. Notice that, and then in comes the next inhalation. And if we do this for a few times with the emphasis on the exhale, the falling breath, the movement toward the belly, this has the effect of settling us. Okay. I wanted just to, before Gayan, before you say a few words, by the way, this is going to be pretty informal. We're going to go back and forth and maybe add on to each other's points, and more like a conversation or a dialogue. We were pretty excited about meeting tonight and sharing with you what we do on New Rain Online. So as I was taking my walk today and kind of musing about spiritual practice and why do we practice and what is spiritual practice anyway, what comes to me at the moment is the ability or the art of living fully, the fullest possible human life, to open to this possibility of fullness. Murshid speaks in his teaching on the soul that the soul is our real life. It's the life of our life. And so in one sense, we could say spirituality is certainly part of it is to awaken to our soul dimension. And that is pure light. And that pure light then infuses everything, daily life, relationships, looking at nature. It's like the Impressionist paintings. It's all about light. In fact, all painting is about light. So when there's this light that is disclosed, open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, disclose to us thy divine light. When this actually starts happening, it lights up our life. It lights up our experience. We see more clearly. We live more fully. We start to get the lay of the land, what's going on. So in one sense, we could say to be fully alive, to be fully engaged in this life that we've been given between our first breath, it's this wet infant that popped out, inhaled, that first inhalation in this body until the last exhale that doesn't have an inhale. So what's between these breaths is our life. And how do we live it? That's what we're addressing in spiritual practice. I'd like to read this quote by Joseph Campbell in an interview with Bill Moyers. I love it. He says, people say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that the life experiences that we have on this purely physical plane will have resonances within us in our innermost being and reality. And so that we actually begin to feel the rapture of being alive. That's what it's finally about. And that's what these clues help us find in ourselves. Okay.
Thank you, Taj.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking that there's 52 people right now who are all focused together on this exploration, all different parts of the world, actually. Ever since we started New Rain Online, I've been really interested in pondering this question about the word practice, like what is it to have a practice? And in thinking about this time together, I was thinking that there's been 3 times in my life when I've taken up a practice. The first time is when I was in elementary school and high school, and I was devoted to basketball. And I remember shooting at least 100 free throws every afternoon in my yard during the off season. And then there came a time when I took up the practice of guitar. And then the third time is taking up spiritual practice. In all of those cases, I took up something that I loved. It wouldn't have worked otherwise, because it's a fair amount of work. For a long time, I wasn't interested in making the guitar a practice. I was just interested in being able to play well enough to accompany myself so I could sing, because I love to sing. And then I noticed that there was a very definite transition, that when I decided I really wanted to get better at the guitar, and I found a teacher, and I started to study some things. And then I remember another point in which I was at a friend's house who's a musician, and she had this 4-page article by this guy, a jazz musician, a pianist, I think, and it was all tips on how to practice. That was awesome. It wasn't about the It wasn't about the techniques, musical theory or techniques. It was about how to become masterful at practice itself. That that is really a window into what we're talking about right now. When I began the spiritual path, I also wasn't that interested in practice. I was mostly interested. I remember hearing Pir Vilayat say, "We're here to build a beautiful world of beautiful people," and that is all I cared about. That made my life make sense to me, and I wanted to serve, and I wanted to be a kind person, and I wanted to be uh, an agent for peace and harmony in the world. I wasn't yet interested in spiritual practice. It was not until I saw that my own inner ecology, my own psyche, was not really equipped to build a beautiful world of beautiful people that I had to get serious about turning toward myself and understand more and purify my own ego and become more subtle in my perception about who I was so that I could take responsibility for my life, that I took up a spiritual practice. We sometimes talk about people coming to the spiritual path, and there's a step one and a step two. Step one, and that makes it sound sort of hierarchical, but it's actually like maybe two different destinies. The first, what we call step one, are people who might come to gatherings. Maybe they like come to Sufi dancing, or they like to go hear a teacher to be inspired, or they like a sense of community. And in some ways, they might be interested in primarily serving the message. That is distinct from taking up an esoteric practice. And that's a real threshold, because at that stage, if that's one's destiny, or if that's the stage one is at, it's not really a discipline yet. To take up a spiritual practice is a combination of discipline and passion. It's a combination of, it requires a steadiness of actually developing skills and developing capacities. But in that steadiness, it can't become rote. Like, part of the art of practice is it has to stay juicy, it has to stay living. And also, what happens when we take up, particularly, specifically spiritual practice, our understanding of what spiritual practice is evolves and grows. We might realize that there's an element that we call formal practice, or sitting on the pillow, where we're actually practicing certain disciplines. But then we see that spiritual practice is actually a mode of living, like Taj was saying. And there's a whole realm of spiritual practice that happens in life. But it's not just, quote, trying to be a good person. It's actually getting very precise and very conscious about taking responsibility for our life, and about being a continual student. For those who take the step of taking up spiritual practice, having the practice itself shapes our life. The steadfastness, the rigor, the humility, the patience, the willingness to learn, the being open, the sacrifice of our point of view, all of these things in the course of taking up a practice actually shapes us, because what's going on in spiritual practice has to do with the change that occurs in the person who is practicing. And I just want to say one other thing before turning it over to Taj, which is, I love the word practice, because it's a corrective to any tendency we have about perfection. It's so much about taking on the uh, attitude and the spirit of someone who is learning and who is willing to fail and who is willing to experiment. That's the spirit of practice. So I'll stop now, but I just wanted to really be clear that for some of us, like if you're an initiate in the Anayati order, you probably have received practices like to do these practices with breath or to do a wazifa. So that's the content of one's practice, but there's a distinction between that and the art of practice itself, which is how to approach those things and how to go through the vicissitudes that happen as you do that, how to deepen one's engagement with that. So that's the terrain that we're exploring and that we were exploring New Rain Online in a kind of a systematic way. What say you?
Okay. I say that we should take a pause for a moment, and because we're going to be giving you some information and tips and sort of what we consider important aspects of the lay of the land with practice. But I wanted to remember that ultimately what we're talking about is deeply sacred. It's, if we remember or think of the most meaningful times in our life where we're deeply, deeply touched, deeply inspired, or just kind of brought low by gratitude or the kind of incomprehensibleness of life. So it's a domain of interiority that then is lived from. That it's practice helps us open to new vistas and new points of view that then the further practice is incorporating and living from those vistas.
Willing to be changed.
Yeah, willing to be changed. And that's not easy for many of us. Like, I hate it when I go to the wrong hair cutter and I get a different haircut. Like,
oh, I know what you mean.
I really, seriously, or, you know, something changes in my life, so they don't have the food I want at the restaurant. So in New Rain, we try and support the landscape, the actual traveling that occurs when we undergo a spiritual training and spiritual practice. And today I was thinking about I've been initiated in the order for, I guess 48 years now. I was initiated in 1969. So I've had over 4 decades of being involved in an esoteric path. And for some decades I was raising children or distracted with various things, graduate school. So, and then my life opened to a space where I could dive much more deeply and consistently into extended practice and daily practice. So I was thinking of these years and thinking back to my actual first retreat. I was always asking Pure, put me on retreat. I want to go on retreat. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted to go. And so I had childcare and I at the abode, and there was a pod up there of his. It was his little spacecraft. And I went in there, had no idea what I was supposed to do or what was going to happen. You could say I was inexperienced. And he had given me instructions. He had said, well, there's the alchemical stages. You do the Zikr and you go through these different alchemical stages. And he gave me a few wazifa, sacred names. He said, yes, first you dissolve, and then you're in the immaculate state, and then you rebirth, you are reborn and in the sacred marriage.
And then he left town.
Yeah, right. So there I was, kind of sitting there, trying to do my best, really trying very hard to do my best. And for a couple of days, I was sailing along. I was having experiences and things were opening. And there was a lot of trying. In those days, we got up at 3 in the morning and so on and so forth. And during that time, I floundered around a lot. I had to find my way, which on one hand, to me, it was a very valuable experience because I feel that I encountered the Zikr fresh inside, discovering my own interiority. However, if there would have been a little more tips for my journey to understand that certain things are part of what comes up naturally, that would have made my retreat, I think, more effective, not like utilitarianly effective, but that I wouldn't have necessarily needed to go down cul-de-sacs and kind of getting in some areas that I had no idea how to be with myself in. And so I just jotted down just a few things that I didn't know then that have since come. And these are some of the kind of things we talk about in our New Rain practice sessions, not all of them, but so I was, knowing spiritual practice is a dynamic process of expansion and contraction, opening and then closing.
What do you mean by closing?
Closing means that when this opening continues, that openness starts touching and bringing up areas in you that are previously unknown or difficult or scary. And so there's a feeling of, you're flowing down a nice river, and then all of a sudden you're upside down in a beaver dam. Like, how did I get here? Or as that poet said, what was the cat? The cat said, the cat went meow. And the mystic said, what's going on? And the cat said, I was the sky, and now I'm landlocked in fur.
Oh, yeah.
So expansion, contraction. That this is part of the dance.
Could you turn up the volume?
Okay, we need to turn the volume up.
Here. How's that?
The other thing is we're not doing something wrong, and we're not deficient if painful things arise.
It's how guidance functions.
Yeah. And when fear arises, it's not necessarily true that there's actual danger, but sometimes a part of ourselves is afraid of deeper transformation when our essential self is starting to break through. So this is where kind of smart practice is useful. Oh, yes, there's times that we really need to engage our will. And in Sufism, this is called mujahida. And other times we really need to sense the hands off, let it be, what's here now. And it's not intelligent to push anymore. We get exhausted, we get resentful, we get turned off. So that's the art of practice. It isn't just all saying the practice over and over. And then another thing, this is just another quick little tip, is that we're so eager to have spiritual experiences. We so want to be home. We so want to feel at ease and know everything's okay. And so when we have an experience, a breakthrough, an opening, we feel that's it. We feel that's it. And then we try and have the experience over and over again, or try to get back to it. So these are just a few things. If I had known these would have helped navigate my way. And the other last thing is that we have lots of notions about what spiritual practice is, what it should be like. We've heard descriptions from others. We compare ourselves to others all the time and think they're having that experience, but I'm not. When we, I love this line from a Rumi poem. Don't be satisfied with stories. Don't be satisfied with stories. how things have gone for others. Unfold your own myth so everyone will understand this passage from the Quran. We have opened you. And one Gayan said at the end of when you were speaking about these stages, the first stage is the seeking. We're seeking. There's an I who's seeking. The second stage is to turn and look, who is the I that is seeking?
One of the things, there's certain pillars or foundations for having a robust spiritual practice. And one of those pillars is motivation, what we sometimes call turning our hearts toward practice. Obviously, motivation is critical, particularly because spiritual practice is synonymous. It's completely embedded in going through our life and all the vicissitudes of going through life, and there's nothing separate in terms of spiritual practice. Should we stop and take it? There's nothing separate from going through the vicissitudes in life and our spiritual practice. So we go through crises of all kinds. We go through dry spells. We go through changes and questioning of all kinds. And so maintaining motivation and having it be real and living is obviously a key to pillar of spiritual practice. And I just wanted to, so there's a lot that can be investigated about that, and maybe we'll touch on a few things right now, but I want to come back to something Taj said, which is there's these openings and the contraction and the real wisdom of knowing that when we hit what feels like a stuck place or a limitation, that it's actually part of the path and it's not something wrong. I've always wanted to rewrite the book Conference of the Birds. It has never really set right with me because there's all these birds traveling and they run into things and they drop off. And until the end, there's only a few straggly birds left. And obviously there's a lot of wisdom in that, but I always feel sorry for the birds who dropped off if they had only had good guidance, if they had only known that the things that they run into,
That's nice.
It's actually very touching because the things they run into, every challenge that you hit, every question that you come upon is potentially a portal to a deeper understanding or some kind of initiatic moment. So in the Conference of the Birds, there were birds who were going along and they started to miss their family, or they started to worry about their security. And in the rendition of the fable, they dropped off, and kind of the lesson is that they didn't have what it takes. And, maybe there's some truth to that. But when you start missing your family, or you start worrying about security when you're on the path, with the right attitude and the right guidance, one can actually ponder and go into a deeper understanding of what your ultimate motive is. But it's very hard a lot of times to get in touch with that in a visceral, known way all by yourself. So that's why I would rewrite Conference of the Birds.
I just wanted to say something about motivation, and Gayan, we're probably not going to get that far in these foundational steps, so we should kind of think about how we're going to frame the rest of it.
Okay, is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Motivation is often not understood and not valued because it's a power. Connecting with our motivation is really connecting with the with the energy and power of what is most important to us. And we oftentimes don't know what's most important because we're distracted or we have urgent things. And so what's deeply, deeply meaningful and important is a few layers down. And so spending time, which we do in New Rain, really talking about motivation, how to connect with your motivation. When you do feel it, even if it's the motivation that's for today, but then there's motivation for one's life. What is going to carry us all the way to the end? That's a deep power in this. We're tapping into the desire that created the universe, according to the Sufis. It's the power of becoming. So we all have different motivations, and some of us deeply need and wish to break out of our suffering. Our suffering can be intense, and there's the motivation to help others out of there. So a relational, a bodhisattva kind of, like, let's make this better. I want my kids to have a good life. So it's a generosity of motivation, and I really want to be the best I can be for that. I want to wake up. I want to so I can provide that or become that. And then there's the motivation of becoming the witness, God's witness for this life, this universe, that God herself is awakening, and we become the eyes and the heart and the body through this knowing happens. So there's quite a wide spectrum of motivations, but we need to find what is truly ours. And when we find it, it just goes bing, we know it.
Yeah, it's not just a concept, and it's not what anyone else says. Our motivation can only be our heart's response. One thing that that keeps a practice alive is to find out, or to and fairly frequently ask yourself, what is your main question in terms of spiritual practice at any given moment? So it can be a question, or it can be your edge, and that requires being really truthful with yourself, and it requires being present with yourself. But that is a way of guarding against practice becoming blah. Like, what is your main question? Sometimes it's something very deep, like, I don't know if I believe in the prayers, or like, how do I know if I'm getting somewhere? Or whatever the question is, if you come close to that question, you're coming close to your heart in relationship to practice. That's one way of feeling how it's real to you and matters to you. Taj, maybe we'll just talk about, not try to cover too much, but our purpose during this time was basically twofold. One is hopefully by exploring some of the thoughts about spiritual practice, that it would perhaps leave you with something useful that you could apply to your own relationship to spiritual practice. Obviously, this is just a taste, but hopefully there was some takeaway. And the second purpose was to give you some exposure or some knowledge of this online community of practice, because without support, it's very difficult to maintain not only a lively spiritual practice, but a spiritual practice where one is learning and growing. That's a whole nother area, which is skillful practice. So that we actually feel, we can tell in a sense that we're getting somewhere or getting better. And that requires practicing skillfully. So we started New Rain Online because we realized what many of the traditions have said, which is that it's really better to do this together. And there's the support of community, and there's the support of guidance and teachings. And if we band together, then it is much, much stronger within us. We have the resources we need to maintain a robust spiritual practice.
And I want to just clarify something. This New Rain Online isn't to replace any other modality of guidance or community that you're currently involved in.
Or especially your relationship with a personal guide.
Personal guide or center that you're in.
It's a particular niche.
It's helping with basically the art of practice, the questions that come up in practice. And so it doesn't interfere. Hopefully it supports and enhances any other spiritual groups that you're in, and working with your personal guide. We do not give individual practices, and we don't prescribe specific practices, but more the how to approach spirituality, and we dig down in that.
Just to add a little more detail for those who are interested, in addition to talking about foundations that apply to any practice or any art, really, we do go into some of the basic practices and try to break down how to approach specifically concentration and meditation and zikr. We might take up the art of prayer. And we also give attention to how to approach life as spiritual practice. So there's a number of things. You could learn more about it if you're interested.
Yeah, we start off with 2 steps, and that is what we call turning our heart towards practice. How do we make that shift? And that involves some of the things we've been talking about, like connecting with our motivation. And the second step, we open to the spirit of guidance, which is both our inner guide, the teacher within us, and in our tradition, we have the silsila transmission. So we have a baraka stream that when we take initiation, we have that larger field of practice of prayer and spiritual practice throughout the ages. So we invoke that in a very conscious way, that we connect up with this stream. Looks like we're coming to the end of our time, and we want to make sure we have a few minutes to give you the actual details of how you can join a New Rain Online if that's something you're interested in. So we have maybe
5 minutes.
We have a couple minutes for question and answers.
Do we? We only have 7 minutes total.
Okay. Why should we cover the information?
Should we do one question? Do you have time?
Is there any burning question? If not, we'll just
raise your hand if you have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. What we would want you to have, if you're wanting it, is to have ongoing steady support so that you could have a strong spiritual practice that feels alive, and that you get the instructions and that you need, and the place where you can pose questions or get specific kind of instruction if you need. So, whoops.
They can't hear.
We're not being heard. Can you chat and let us know if you can hear us? Oops. Okay. Just going to pause for a moment. Okay. There's someone that can hear us.
Okay, so we'll go on.
All right. Okay, we're getting lots of yeses.
Excellent. Thank you.
So that's the purpose of New Rain Online, to support you so that if you desire to have a kind of strength and aliveness to the interconnectivity that you have the support you need. It's something we're very passionate about. So we have this monthly class. It's in California, it's Saturday mornings, and it's for an hour and a half. And I think there's about 92 or 95 people in New Rain Online, and about half the people make the monthly class live. The rest of the people listen to the recording at their convenience whenever they want. And generally, through the months, we will explore a theme. And then twice a week, we send out what we call tips via email. And those continue to give some kind of perspective on the theme, and oftentimes a suggestion for how to practice within that theme. Recently, we have decided, and Satya is working on the technology of this, to make all the archives of all the tips that have happened in the last 2 years available to anybody who's on New Rain Online. So that's actually, I think, quite a valuable library.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, there really is.
And the classes are going to be available in the library. Is that correct?
Is that true, Satya?
And so the library will just has one bundle in it now, but we'll just be continually adding.
Satya said that the library has one bundle in it now, but there will be continual additions to that. And we've been doing this for almost a couple of years, and so there's a lot of material in there.
And as this evolves, the classes and tips will be thematically organized. So hopefully it's very easy if you want to explore some of the tips or instructions on Zikr, you can just go to that bundle.
Yeah, for example, we just completed a 6-week series of tips following some practice online of 6 steps of meditation, which are not spelled out anywhere else. We had to put them together from Murshid's teaching and the different stages from concentration all the way up through unity awareness. And those are an example of a theme.
And I want to say something before we end, which is that what we focus on thematically is influenced by your interest. So if people write to us and tell us their questions or what they're feeling mostly inspired by, that does have some influence on the direction of the group.
If you want to join New Rain Online, Satya's posting the link for signing up. That should be in the chat box. Is that right, Satya? And just the details, it costs $29 a month. And
you can join or quit anytime you want.
And if we're having a special today. If you
get fries and a drink
to Saturday, right? If you sign up for between now and Saturday, and you put the code July in, then you get a free class.
You get a free month.
A free month. That's right.
So if you're interested in checking out New Rain Online, just sign up before Saturday, and then you can either participate in the Saturday class live, or you can listen to it at your leisure, and you'll get the tips for a month, which is like eight tips.
Yeah. Anything else, Satya? Well, this has been great. I'm really glad you joined us. And
so did you say the next class is this Saturday at 10?
Oh.
Yeah. The next class is this Saturday. It's at 10 o'clock Pacific time. But if you sign up, you'll get a notice. And Satya will send you a link.
Is that going to be on Maestro, or is it going to be now on Zoom?
It's going to be on Maestro, this next one, but we may be moving to Zoom soon.
So you'll find out how to do it. There's a Maestro connection, and you'll get all the information on if you want that.
Well, friends, I'm just going to take a moment right now, and we've scrolled through many of your names, and just feel the formless but very real connection we all have right in this instant. And for those who are listening at another now, the same instant, our hearts are linked in a certain kind of caring, a certain kind of priority. Perhaps we can just feel that right now and just relax any sense of being kind of a solo act. we can develop a sensitivity to our shared field of presence. So, Taj, do you
Okay,
want to say
thank you.
anything?
No.
Dan?
Nice to be with you, Gayan. Thank you, Satya, for your tech support.
Bye-bye, everyone.
And thanks for joining.
And if you have any feedback about the technology or about this webinar, please feel free to write us. We plan to do these freebies every once in a while, in case they're helpful to people.
They can email support@newrain.info for questions.
So what?
They can email support@newrain.info.
Oh yeah, you can email at support@newrain.com.
No,
.info.
for questions.
Support@newrain.info. Bye-bye.